Hello guys, welcome back to another video. This is part one of a two-part video series with the focus being on mastery of the self while on semen retention. I'm going to talk about managing and regulating the emotions while in a semen retention state. Any force that we have, especially the retention force that we've accumulated, is viable to be influenced by various factors, and emotions are no different to the influencing of us on SR. I've often seen on the Reddit page people talking about an increased level of anger, this emotion, and how can they go about best managing such a emotion. And usually in this case, it can lead to somebody growing very frustrated. Maybe things aren't going the way they planned with regards to their objectives on retention, and they end up releasing or relapsing. So we must first understand that we're thrust into this life at birth and the world around us is chaotic. And we somewhat are able to navigate through life, but it's usually at the beck and call of the circumstances in and around us. What a lot of us fail to understand is that our emotions are key to us hitting certain targets with almost 100% accuracy. And the quicker we can learn to rein in our emotions and use them to our advantage, the better we will be at navigating this tempestuous environment that we're surrounded by. So we know retention is this potent force that gives us a creative edge. We are filled with a level of vivacity compared to a person who's not on retention. We have this bustling energy and almost a restlessness about us for those of us who go in extended periods on retention. And so when you're in a emotional state, if you are unaware as to the impact the emotion is having on you, it can lead you to essentially destruction and lead to you releasing your seed due to the fact that your emotion has triggered you and maybe pushed you into doing something that you really didn't want to do. And so in order to manage these emotions, we must first look back at scenarios that will draw particular emotions out of us, and we must refamiliarize ourselves with these scenarios via a meditative practice. So in my younger years, I used to be stuck in traffic a lot, going to and fro, meeting clients, and I would get very frustrated, angry, and annoyed. And when I had these outbursts, I want you guys to think about these outbursts as being bursts of energy just being put back into the environment, and there's nothing came of it. Essentially, it was a waste of energy. This packet of energy I just dispensed, and guess what? I still feel horrible. I still have to go and toil and be stuck in traffic for however long, 30 to an hour. And so that energy output has been wasted. It hasn't gone into anything productive, and I was at the beck and call of my emotions. And as time progressed and I read more, studied more, I realized that I can use these packets of energy, these bursts of energy to my advantage. So what you must be doing in your meditative practice, guys, is bringing out scenarios that will trigger certain emotions. And what you're doing is familiarizing yourself with being in that emotional state. But guess what? You are the ones calling the emotion into existence. It's not the other way around. Consider this to be your weapon of choice to tackle the challenges that life is throwing at you while you move on your journey to hit whatever objectives you've got set out for yourself. Akin to a warrior drawing for his tool or a weapon from his armamentarium, so too should you be able to draw on a particular emotion to motivate and enhance you and push you further on your road to reaching your targets, okay? And so I consider retention to be this fuel, okay? And we need a gauge, right? And the emotion can combine with the retentive state to help us and to give us that extra 10 or even 20% to get over the line. And so if we're not aware as to the impact the emotion is having over us, it can take us any which way it wants. So it's better to be in the driving seat and aware as to how this emotion is causing you to react to a particular situation. And again, we go back to meditation where you have the observer and you want to bring about the particular emotion. let's say, for example, you used to study at primary school or junior high, as you guys may call it in the United States, and a teacher, a horrible person, told you, you ain't gonna be shit. You ain't gonna be shit, you're gonna fail. How did you feel when that teacher told you this thing repeatedly? I imagine for some of you that experienced this, and I hope not many of you experienced this, but if you did, how did you feel? And oftentimes is these things we often repress and throw away, right? Especially as men, we're taught not to really focus on these emotions. But what we do as a advanced man or a man who is on the path to a superior way of being, we need to be able to draw on these things and use them as fuel to get to our target. And I'm going to talk about a very famous case that you guys can use as inspiration if you think, okay, well, I'm kind of not getting it here. I'll talk about a very famous case in a minute. And so what you're going to be doing, guys, is in your meditation sessions, you should be simulating and actually jumping back into whatever scenario it was that brought about, let's say, a negative emotion, and face this. Face it and allow the emotion to rise. But what you're not going to do is allow this emotion to take control of you. You are the one who ignites this emotive flame, and you're going to use that. Okay, I felt anger back then when my teacher told me I'm never going to be, never going to amount to anything. And so when you're working, when you're at the gym, when you're on your daily mission to accomplish your long-term targets, because you've been practicing you've been focusing and training your mind as to bringing out these emotions, putting yourself and simulating these past experiences to trigger that emotion, you too can pull on that if you lack motivation or if you lack certain guile to push you over the line, maybe to finish a project, to maybe give you that 10%, 20% more at the gym to lift that weight that you've been working towards. It could be a PR and you need the extra juice. Simulate the situation in your mind as you're bending down to deadlift. Yeah, these people told me I'm never going to be shit. These people told me I'll never be nothing, that my physique is, so on and so forth. And use that. And what you begin to do is you're calling on that force. You're calling on that energetic burst. And what you'll notice is a shift. And use that shift to get you over the line, whether that be for training, that could be for work. I'm going back to when I used to be stuck in the traffic, okay? Think about, well, I don't ever want to be in this situation again. And if I am, I'll try to limit it as much as possible. So how did you feel in these scenarios? Go back and replicate. You might think, well, oh, I need to let go of the past. Yes, you are letting go of the past, essentially. But what you're not going to do is forget it. You can use any and everything as a tool to enhance you and give you the edge over others in this life. And if you're able to draw on your emotions when you choose and acknowledge them, okay, this is the emotion I'm feeling. How can I essentially be an alchemist and transform this energy into another state, right? So you're looking at anger, right? And then you're going to transform that to finish or even start a project. And at the end, you have a completely different thing. So it's not your energy just being wasted, maybe via a quick masturbation session in the bathroom because you're angry and pissed off at your boss who's giving you shit all day at work. So there's no end product. You have nothing to produce at the end of that. However, you can take the same anger and frustration and say, man, actually, I want to work my way out of this. So every day you're harnessing this thought, you're harnessing these emotions and putting them towards maybe your side hustle. You've got a business on the side that, pre-retention, I didn't have the creativity. Now on retention, I have the creativity, but I don't have maybe the direction and the extra push, the emotional drawing, by drawing not literally like this drawing, but pulling from that scenario, putting yourself back into a situation maybe whereby you were in a meeting and your superior belittled you and made you feel small in front of your colleagues. Use that energy while you're sat down thinking, should I do this today? I worked 12 plus hours. I don't know if I can give an hour to my job. I'll save it for the weekend. So you procrastinate, but maybe drawing on that energetic force of the emotion can get you to do that and put you in that state to say, man, I want to get out of this position as quickly as possible. And so you are an alchemist of your own life. You're taking elements from all around you and you're transforming it to your advantage to produce something new from it. Okay, so you see, you go from something intangible to maybe a tangible product, a business that's now on the Instagram or TikTok marketplace. right? Good. And so this is key, guys. So in your meditation sessions, you want to, and this is what I like to do. Sometimes I'll go in and just have a meditation session whereby I'm just calming my mind down. I did a lot today. I just want to relax. I don't really want to focus on a particular task. But then you should also have a session whereby you are bringing about certain scenarios and you're juggling, these different emotions. You can look at past, present, and future, right? Some of you might be in circumstances right now whereby you think, right now, I'm not doing financially great, nor are my family. I want to pull them out of this situation. And you can think, I've talked about negative emotions, but what about the positive emotions and the future? How will it feel to take your mom and dad out of the hood or out of, the projects, so to speak, paying off their mortgage, buying them a new car? So visualize these things and let the emotions that these visualizations bring spur you on or ignite the flame. So you have the creativity from retention, right? You have the somewhat energy and restlessness, but now you need the extra motive, and you harnessing the energy from that emotion via meditation can get you over the line to say, look, man, I think I might just go 50% today with regards to my project planning. But then you say, wait, hold on, let me visualize the scenario of me buying my mum a new house in the suburbs, in an area that's not rife or replete with crime. How do your parents feel in that scenario? Visualize you handing over the keys. Visualize you opening the door and saying, Mom and Dad, this is your new apartment. How does that feel? And use that and transfer that energy, that feeling into a creative endeavor. And retention will put the pieces together to give you the innovative edge, pulling from the, let's say, akasha, or pulling from the higher plane, right? To give you that innovative edge over others maybe in the same space. And I want to finish up with, I've got a fusion here. So combining, I forgot to mention, combining the emotions and retention, almost like a fusion. I mentioned this in, I think, previous videos with regards to Vegeta and Goku. You can imagine maybe retention being, let's say, Vegeta, and the emotional control or something being Goku. Combining the two, and your objectives are reached with more efficiency. And I want to leave on a final note with regards to Star Wars and how the main characters in Star Wars could be seen as a symbol for the brain, and how having all aspects of the brain in unison, taking from Plato's triune brain or even the tripart soul, and using this essentially just as a concept to understand by how uniting everything, having this holy trinity, can we be the overman, right, or the superior man? And we know Vader can represent the father figure, and he represents logic, wisdom, and reason. The Holy Spirit being the force, okay, akin to our creative and vital life force that flows through our body. And the sun here representing the mammalian aspect, or even the reptilian part of the brain, and that represents Luke or even a young Anakin. So let's put here Luke, Anakin. We can even throw in Obi-Wan and Yoda as well. All right, let's just focus here on Vader, Luke, and Anakin, and the Holy Spirit representing SR, the Force. And so Vader, having learned from his mistakes, right, Vader gave into his lower carnal nature. He was focused, especially when he was the young Anakin, the promising talent, he focused very much on passion. He focused on love. He was very emotional. He loved Padme. He would even go against the Jedi Council to spend time with his girlfriend and then wife. He was focused on power through Palpatine, who warped his mind to the dark side. And you can see through giving into carnality, essentially it led to his destruction, and he became a shadow of his former self. Shadow of his former self is key here, because he failed, the young Anakin failed to integrate the negative aspects of his shadow into himself effectively. And essentially they demonstrated themselves in a very harsh and violent manner. He lost his wife, he lost his limbs, and he lost the potential that he could have been. But what we notice is with Vader, he was able to, through his mistakes, rise up and almost take on this sagacious and avuncular figure, especially for Luke, when he told him, with our combined strength, we can end this destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy. I'm sure if Qui-Gon had been alive, Qui-Gon would have said the same thing to Anakin, being the father figure. Unfortunately, he wasn't there. So Vader taking on this figure and taking on the reason and wisdom and logic and saying, only by us uniting Luke, Luke being very impulsive, sometimes brash, he saw himself in Luke and he realized Luke has the same potential I once had. And it's for us in our daily endeavors when we might want to give into carnality. I'm on a 3-4 month streak and this bad Instagram girl is walking. She's given me her number. Conversations are flowing. However, you know, I'm set to make 100,000 now, closing my business deal or something like that. All I need to do is spend a couple more hours at the end of the day to just fine tune some details. But I've got this girl banging up my line, wanting to spend time with me. And you know what that means. So you could give into carnality, but then because you've mastered the meditative space and the observer is always watching now, the observer is well versed in these carnal desires that can appear, right? You sit back and you think, what's the benefit of me doing such a thing? What are the pros and cons? The pros, maybe short term, cool, I bust a nut, I release, it feels good for what? A second, and I'm back to square one. Is this girl going to be conducive to my long-term success? Or could I use the same force and potency that I have and use it to put 2 to 3 more hours in a day working on closing that business deal? And so therefore you have the reasoning aspect and the logic coming into your decision making, and you're not just operating on impulsivity and emotion alone. And so you unite your lower nature, okay, that's coming up, and it needs guidance through the front part of the brain, using the Holy Spirit, essentially the force that sits within you, this creative force, and your emotions in order to create something new, create something different and innovative. And it's only through uniting all of these aspects of the brain and of ourself that we can truly be an integrated individual, as Jung calls it, or be the integrated mind, which is what Vader is calling Luke to do, which is what Vader and Star Wars is calling us to do, to realize our potential as young men or young Jedis on this spiritual journey. Okay, keep that in mind. Vader's failure to integrate his shadow successfully led to his demise, but still he was able to learn from his mistakes so he could pass on the knowledge to his younger self, or his son, essentially. And so what we can learn from this is, yes, we're going to make mistakes on this journey. That's completely fine. But we should always seek to get a lesson out of the previous mistakes we've made. And so as we progress, we begin to use logic and reasoning more. I did this before. What did it amount to? I went and had relations with a girl, and I know this type of woman, you know. What did it amount to? So you go back and you read from the different scripts that life has written for you up until your present point. And you guide your impulsivity, you guide your carnal nature, you guide your emotions. And as a result, you become the integrated mind, or you become the superior man who sits above everybody else. And just to conclude, with regards to a famous sports person, Michael Jordan, who would use situations, and we might just brush it off as thinking, oh, it's just a normal conversation that he's having with somebody. In his Netflix documentary, he'd really go on about, oh, taking things personal and saying, oh, that's all I needed. And you could see how in his mind, maybe unbeknownst to him, he would create this environment and he'd allow the scenario to generate an emotion. He'd transfer that emotion into energy, and he'd use that to fuel him on the basketball court to give him the competitive edge. And I need not speak about Jordan's illustrious career, but it's just to highlight what I was mentioning earlier about immersing yourself in a scenario. You can even create fictitious scenarios that rile you up for a particular purpose. Get yourself angry if you don't have something that recently angered you, but you know that once you do that, you use it for its time or its purpose and then discard it. So Jordan would get frustrated or angry or get even more competitive and say, that's all I needed. The guy touched me or he looked at me the wrong way, that's all I needed. And he'd use that as fuel, and it would give him this competitive edge. If you look in his eyes during these games, you can see he's just on a different plane, a different level. And I think there's also a NFL linebacker who used to create fights or create scenarios and conflicts just so he could get into a state of anger and excitation to get him really locked in for NFL games. I'm not sure what linebacker it was, but it's just to give you some examples of sports people who did this. Okay, so again, don't count the days, make the days count.